We're going to talk about a very, very important topic about small for gestational age babies and particularly what happens to them over a long term. Now, we all know that there are a lot of short term implications which are there in SGA, particularly with regards to hypoglycemia, with regards to perinatal issues, but there are a lot of long term issues, especially with regards to growth, with regards to development, with regards to puberty and obesity, which are there. So today we are going to go through a lot of these issues and try to focus on key aspects of evaluation and management. And as in many parts of pediatric endocrinology, we need to have a careful mix of regular evaluation and preventive measures to avoid long-term complications. There are a lot of implications, particularly with regards to growth, and we'll see how there is a dichotomous pattern in terms of when one group of individuals will grow a lot and that will cause more metabolic complications, while the other may not grow at all, resulting in short stature and other complications which are there in that regards. So we'll discuss about that in detail. All of you can go and have a look at our website, learning.growsociety.in, which has got a lot of information about pediatric endocrinology, including courses in pediatric endocrinology. And we have recently launched our book, which is available both as a paperback as well as a Kindle version
of SGA. In most of the cases, it is pretty much obvious in determining the cause. It is usually done just by looking at the clinical examination of the mother or just taking the detailed antenatal history. But in some cases, the cause is not usually identified. It is not pretty much straightforward. And most of these cases, it is usually labeled as idiopathic SGA and it is not further evaluated. So the purpose of knowing about various etiology is to determine what is the basic cause, and identifying a particular cause will help us to know whether the child will have a good prognosis, will he be able to catch up in the subsequent years, and in case if he doesn't catch up, will he be able to respond to the growth hormone therapy. So at the end of this discussion, we'll be developing an algorithm on how to approach to the etiology of SGA and whether we need to follow up, evaluate, or we need to treat in case of any complications. So there are various causes of SGA, and we are broadly dividing into three categories. First is the maternal, which is basically due to various socio-economic factors, obstetric factors, and medical diseases. These group of people usually tend to have a better catch-up in the subsequent years, and they have a good prognosis with respect to SGA. And the next one is the fetal cause, which is most likely due to genetic or certain malformation. These are the ones which are most likely to have many complications, and also the ones who have chance of poor prognosis in the subsequent years and they fail to catch up. And the next one, the group includes the placental problems, which includes the various abnormalities, which we'll be discussing in detail. They also tend to have a good catch-up and also have a good prognosis in the further subsequent years. So before moving into the etiology, we'll have a brief discussion on how a fetus grows during the intrauterine period. So basically, it is an interplay of various factors, and among them, the most important one is the insulin growth factor 1. This is being secreted by the fetal liver at around 3 months of age, and this is responsible for the major proportion of fetal growth. And similar to IGF-1, IGF-2 also plays a similar role by acting on the IGF-1 receptor and also acting on the insulin receptor. And as I also mentioned, the third one is the insulin. The insulin, as you all know, in child who are born to infants of diabetic mother tend to be macrosomic. This is basically because of the increased fetal insulin production in response to maternal hyperglycemia, and this insulin acts on the IGF-1 receptor, causing increased growth. And insulin also has an action on IGF-1 receptor, which is basically causing the increased growth. And the fourth, which is very interesting, is the growth hormone variant, which is being secreted by the placenta, and it enters the maternal circulation and increases the blood sugar level. This increased blood sugar level indirectly stimulates the fetal pancreas to secrete insulin, and this in way leads to increased growth. And another way by which the GH variant acts is also by it directly stimulates the insulin growth factor 1, thereby increasing growth. And last but not the least is the growth hormone, which the role of growth hormone in fetal growth is very minimal. This is not because of the fact that it is produced less, it is basically because of the increased resistance that is seen in the intrauterine period. So overall, to summarize regarding the fetal growth. IGF is the major regulator of fetal growth, and it's not growth hormone. Growth hormone has a very limited role, and it is because of increased growth hormone resistance. And next, before moving on into the etiology, we also need to know regarding the important chromosome 11, which consists of two imprinting regions. The imprinting 1 controls the IGF-2 projection, and it is being methylated at the paternal allele. In case of any abnormality in the case of methylation or deletion of this particular paternal allele, it will lead to severe form of SGA. And there's another important region which is present in the same chromosome, which is present expressed only in the maternal allele, and it is basically responsible for growth restriction. Whenever we have a duplication of this maternal allele, it leads to increased production of cyclin dependent kinase, thereby leading to growth retardation.
Just hold on to that. It's very important. So when you say imprinting, it basically means that there is a link from the inheritance where you're getting the genes and go forward from there. And this is a very important evolutionary perspective. If you talk about the competition between the father and the mother about the fetal size, who do you think would like the size to be bigger?
Father, sir.
And the mother?
Smaller.
Because the mother's nutrition has to be there, so they can't allow overgrowth. So this is a wonderful example of what has happened here, is that you've got this chromosome. There are two groups of genes. One, IGF-2 is regulated by the father, which is causing more growth, while the other one is regulated by the mother, causing less growth. So this is this wonderful balance, this yin-yang balance, which is being maintained. So if your father's part is going to act less, you will have growth, less growth. And if the mother's genes are acting more, which is the cyclin-dependent kinase, again, you will have less growth. The opposite will happen if you have paternal overexpression and maternal underexpression. So this is the typical site, as you will discuss subsequently, of the Russell-Silver syndrome versus Beckwith-Wiedemann. So paternal overexpression will cause Beckwith-Wiedemann, maternal overexpression will cause Silver-Russell. So this is overall balance between father's drive to make the child bigger and mother's drive to make the child in a reasonable state so that they don't become too big in that perspective. So I think this is very important point.
So getting back to our topic, so let's move on to the various etiologies. Among them, the maternal factors are the most common, and they can be divided into three broad categories. First is the social and economic factors. And among these social and economic factors, we divide them into ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and education as one single group, because in a population belonging to the South Asian origin, where most of the economic status of most of the people is generally poor and the education status is also low, we found that there was a very greater incidence of SGA. And in the study which was conducted in the year 2010, it was found that the prevalence was about 29% in the South Asian ethnicity, and India was found to be ranked among the top. Next, moving on to the various lifestyle factors of your mother, such as smoking. The smoking in both ways is very harmful, active smoking as well as passive smoking. When you take regards the active smoking, what basically happens is there's a very high incidence of around 30% of a baby born with SGA when the mother is actively smoking, and even forms of passive smoking has led to milder forms of SGA. And other basic factors such as the pollution, living in high altitude also contribute to mild form of SGA. Next, moving on to various medical factors such as medical diseases in the form of infection, chronic diseases, pathological conditions of pregnancy such as pregnancy-induced hypertension, and GDM in case if it is associated with vasculopathy, any form of psychological stress, any form of depression, or in case of any teratogenic drug intake by the mother, these factors hamper the growth of the fetus, thereby leading to SGA. And the third most important factors are the obstetric factors, which some of them are modifiable. Maternal age of below 18 years and above 35 years were found to have a higher incidence of SGA. And regarding the parity, there are two groups. Nulliparous women who are below 18 years were found to have more incidence of SGA because of the decreased stretching, due to increased resistance. And they were found, there was a study which found that first-born child were found to be 250 grams lower than the subsequent siblings. Other group includes the multiparous women who have decreased gap between deliveries, had a very high incidence of SGA. Then the most important factor that we encounter in the developing countries is the maternal malnutrition. Maternal malnutrition is the most important and significant cause of SGA in majority of the babies. And in case of a gestational weight gain, if it is less than 11 kilos, they are found to have a very high incidence of SGA. And any form of weight loss which could be precipitated in the form of anorexia nervosa or hyperemesis gravidarum, there was an increased incidence of SGA among these patients. And miscellaneous causes such as the history of any previous stillbirth, preterm, or SGA. So this was the article which I already described. Next, moving on to the placental factors. Placenta basically is the important source of delivery of oxygen and nutrient to the fetus. Whenever there's an abnormality in the placenta, it results in decreased delivery of oxygen and nutrient to the fetus. So what are the various causes of placental? It could be either in the form of placental dysfunction caused due to the most common cause of pregnancy-induced hypertension, or it could be due to any abnormalities such as the filamentous cord insertion, single umbilical artery, synovial notch, placenta previa or abruptio placenta, or it could be due to any placental infarct that is caused as a result of coagulative abnormality, which is normally encountered in the form of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome or any form of placental infection such as congenital malaria. And coming to the last causes, which is very rare, and these are the causes which should be ideally labeled as the idiopathic SGA, which includes the conformed placental mosaicism, chronic vellitis of unknown origin, and placental hemangiomas. These are extremely rare causes, and they are usually identified when we don't find a particular etiology. And I already mentioned this was a study which was basically done in the South Indian population between 1996 to 2010. It was found that the most common risk factor contributed to the SGA was the multiparous woman who had a decreased time interval between two subsequent births, and also pregnancy-induced hypertension. And it also found that when we started improving the nutritional status of the woman, the SGA tend to be incidence of SGA were found to be very less.
But if you see, there is hardly any change from 10% to around 8%. So there is some decline.
But it's not great.
It could have been like 15 years. So still a lot of these nutritional issues which are there. So I think predominantly most of them will be nutritional. So you talked about maternal placental factors. How would you clinically differentiate the two in terms of their outcome? How will maternal and placental?
Sir, I already mentioned they generally tend to have a good outcome because this is only present during the intrauterine period, after which both the factors are removed. So basically, they tend to have a very good catch-up in case the nutrition is restored and basic availability for the mother, for the baby if it is present.
So they are the second child who had a rapid growth, and they can be a more risk of developing
complications.
So I think it will be very, very vary about two conditions. You talked about maternal PIH
yes.
and maternal diabetes. So if you have maternal diabetes, usually it causes macrosomia, but vasculopathy will cause SGA. So if you have maternal diabetes, what is the risk of developing type 2 diabetes in the child?
Sure.
60%. So there is a 60% chance if the mother has diabetes during pregnancy for the child to develop diabetes. So that is very important that we take care of their weight. Otherwise, once the environment improves, they will grow rapidly. So that is a typical second case situation in these two.
Next, we move on to the genetic causes. These are the causes which usually do not respond to growth hormone therapy or may not respond to growth hormone therapy and generally tend to have a poor prognosis following the postnatal period. These includes the various categories such as the imprinting disorders, various endocrine causes which are associated with the abnormalities in the growth hormone IGF axis, defects in the various genes that are responsible for cartilage growth, and various defects in the genes involved in the intracellular pathways and other chromosomal abnormalities. So the most common among the genetic causes are the imprinting disorders. So imprinting disorders, as Sarah has already mentioned, the clinical manifestation of the disease depend on the gene variant from the parent of origin. So basically what happens, or what we already explained in the few slides before, basically the chromosome 11 contains two imprinting centers. One imprinting center is being expressed in the father and other imprinting center is explained in the mother. So what basically happens in case if there is a deletion or in case of a methylation defect involving the paternal allele, then then it will land up in a severe form of SGA. And in case there is a duplication of the maternal imprinting center, then it will result in severe form of SGA. So basically the manifestation of the disease depend on the parental gene from which it is arising. So there could be various disorder such as the uniparental disomy, in which both the alleles are coming from a single parent, and this is the most common type that is encountered in case of imprinting disorders. Next is the duplication of the affected gene, which is already been described, and the methylation defects. And among the imprinting disorder, the most common that we encounter in the practice is the Silver-Russell syndrome. And we'll just have a basic idea of what Silver-Russell syndrome is. So basically, Silver-Russell syndrome, as we already dealt in detail regarding the genetics, it could be either as a result of loss of methylation in the chromosome 11 region, causing downregulation of the IGF2 activity, or could be either as a result of duplication of the maternal allele, resulting in overexpression of the cyclin-dependent kinases, or it could be either as a result of deletion of paternal gene, leading to decreased activity of IGF2. And there are very rare causes which are caused as a result of mutations in the oncogenes such as HMG-A2 and PLAG1. Next, how do you find out a case of whether it is a SGA who is presenting with Silver-Russell syndrome? So it is basically made up on the presence of other characteristic features in the form of triangular facies, relative macrocephaly, frontal bossing, clinodactyly, asymmetry of body or face, and they are usually associated with feeding difficulties. And complications in Silver-Russell syndrome are similar to that of the other SGA who are due to various other causes, which will be dealt in detail in the subsequent discussion. This is a classical picture of a girl with Silver-Russell syndrome who had severe antenatal and the postnatal growth retardation and had clear dysmorphic features. And the management, since the axis involved is the IGF2 pathway, giving them growth hormone would be beneficial, and they generally tend to respond to growth hormone therapy. And there is a specific system known as an Edson-Harbinson system, which considers various clinical features into consideration for the diagnosis of.
So why do we need to diagnose somebody who has SGA with Silver-Russell syndrome? What is the implication?
Sir, because the thing is that we need to take care of the basically monitor the growth, and they are the ones who will need growth hormone therapy for their growth because they will have severe growth retardation.
Generally, if you compare somebody non-Silver-Russell who are required treated with growth hormone versus Silver-Russell treated with growth hormone, which one will have a better outcome?
So non-Silver-Russell treated.
So generally, this is a bad prognosis marker, especially some of those genetic defects, imprinting defects who have a bad prognostic marker. So identifying this will be very important. So I think why are we focusing on this? Very important that if you identify somebody with SGA with this species, then you don't need to do any other much investigations in terms of all the other screening workup. This is Silver-Russell syndrome directly. What are the other syndromes which are very, very important to diagnose before you start GH?
Sir, in case if there is any defect in the IGF pathway, so they generally do not respond.
Anything, any other thing where you don't want to give GH in that setting, which will cause harm?
No.
So all those conditions which will cause SGA, and those will have risk of cancer, tumor breakage. So basically chromosomal breakage syndrome, like Fanconi syndrome, like Bloom syndrome, all those have to be excluded. So that's why this dysmorphology is very, very important in that perspective. Downs will be obvious. We don't remember more Downs in that sense. But Blooms, Fanconi, these will be the most important from that perspective. Downs anyway is a contraindication. Okay.
So other causes of imprinting disease can also be made out with the help of various dysmorphic features, such as the Prader-Willi syndrome, which is characterized by the presence of neonatal hypotonia causing severe feeding difficulties and failure to thrive, and presence of almond-shaped eyes and short hands and feet. However, in the early childhood, they are associated with hyperphagia, which leads to obesity. Next includes the pseudo-hypoparathyroidism and pseudo-hypoparathyroidism, which are usually identified by the presence of Albert-Hereditary osteodystrophy features characterized by the presence of round faces, short stature, and in the presence of short hands and feet, and brachymetacarpia. And the last one is the very rare cause, which is the maternal uniparental disomy of chromosome 20, which is characterized by the presence of prominent feeding difficulty and fifth finger clinodactyly. Next group of disorders which is coming under the genetic cause includes the disorders in the growth hormone and IGF-1 axis. As already mentioned, growth hormone has a very limited role in case of fetal growth, and any condition which is causing growth hormone deficiency will not present with SGA, and in case it is present, is very mild. And those defects which are associated with this axis are the one which is having defects in the IGF production, because IGF is the one which is responsible for the fetal growth. So they are, since the problem is basically with the level of IGF, giving them growth hormone would not be beneficial. And some of the defects that are basically under the IGF-1 axis defect includes the IGF-1 deficiency, IGF-2 deficiency, ALS deficiency, and IGF-1 resistance. Among these, IGF-2 deficiency, because of the intactness of the IGF-1 axis, they can show response to growth hormone therapy. Next group.
That is pretty much, as you say, variant, they are pretty much like silver russell, because
Yes.
now it's because of IGF-2 defect in that.
Next, we want to the paracrine defects. These defects are generally due to the various genes which are responsible for the cartilage growth, and also various intracellular pathway which are responsible for the process of growth signaling. So these defects usually results in various forms of skeletal dysplasia, and in these defects, instead of the birth weight, as already mentioned by Manoj, the birth length is more severely affected. These are usually identified in the presence of disproportionate short stature and other anthropometric measures such as the rhizomelic length and characteristic radiological features. And this group of patients do not respond to growth hormone therapy, and includes various disorders such as achondroplasia, hypochondroplasia, brachydactyly, shock gene defect, Noonan syndrome, neurofibromatosis.
So theoretically, they will not come from the SGF or weight. Typically, the weight may be normal. It is more like the overall shape and other parameters which will give you an overview of that.
Next, we move on to the last part of our discussion, is the Turner syndrome. And these are the ones who present commonly with short stature, but they usually tend to present with pubertal problems, and usually present during the adolescent age group. And they can be even identified at the time of birth, in case if it is associated with lymphedema, webbing of neck, or any USG abnormalities.
So what's the usual height SDS or length SDS in Turner's at birth?
So it is mild form of
minus one would be the typical. So some of them may be SGA, but not typically SGA. So all of this you have talked about. The most important ones are Silver Russell syndrome, which will be very, very important. And from a clinical perspective, all those pre-cancer syndromes which you have to identify before you give creation.
And it is usually diagnosed by karyotyping, and growth hormone is effective in case of Turner syndrome. So basic algorithm or how to approach a SGA baby. First and foremost, we need to have a detailed history and physical examination. And then the foremost thing is we have to have a complete examination of the baby regarding the birth weight, head circumference, and birth length. In case if only the birth weight parameters affected and head circumference or the birth length is bad, it is an asymmetric form of SGA, and this is the most common that is encountered in our practice. This contributes to around 90 to 95% of the babies born with SGA. And in this case, we need to have a detailed maternal placental factors, and most of the cases we usually find out a particular cause, and they are generally followed up, and to ensure that they do not have a rapid growth, or whether they are able to catch up postnatally. Next group includes.
You talked about this group asymmetric with the head circumference and birth weight spread. What would be the objective criteria you would like us to use? How would you say that the birth length is preserved? Is there any index that you want to tell us about?
So ponderal index is one of the things we can easily find out.
What will happen with ponderal index here?
So ponderal index will be more than +2, sir. In case of it is a symmetric, it will be less than -2.
So basically what you're trying to say is that what is ponderal index?
So ponderal index basically comparing the birth length as well as weight. It is basically the formula is weight in gram divided by length the whole cube.
So it is something like a BMI.
BMI.
So you are getting an idea as to what your weight is and what your length is. So if your length is normal, ponderal index will be low.
Yes.
So that would mean that your weight is predominantly affected. While if your length is less, your ponderal index will be on the higher side. So that becomes an important point in that regard.
So next, moving on to the next group, symmetric SGA. These are the one which I already mentioned. They have very bad prognosis because they could be due to any pathology. And first and foremost thing, that is the most common cause, we need to assess the nutritional status of the mother. And in case if she is found to be severely malnourished, then we have to regularly follow up the child for his growth and also see whether he is growing or he is able to catch up. In case if he is not able to catch up, then we can give growth hormone therapy, which would be ideal in this situation. Next, in case the mother is healthy, then we need to look for any presence of any congenital infection, and we need to treat them in case if there is any. The mother is healthy and there was no history of infection and all the infection tests are negative, then the most important thing that we need to look is the presence of dysmorphic phases for any particular genetic syndrome, and we need to do a genetic test to identify. In case of all the three are normal, then we need to look for any asymmetry or any disproportionate short stature. And in case if it it is a disproportionate short stature, then we need to consider from some forms of skeletal dysplasia.
So what is CRL versus BL?
So CRL, crown lump length versus the birth length, sir.
So you have to mention.
Mention.
So this is basically again an upper segment, lower segment.
It's
Very simple. So what you're trying to say is that you're looking as in short stature. You say that you have to look for whether the weight is more affected or the height is more affected, then whether the segment, upper segment is more affected, lower segment is more affected. So what you clearly said is that if your length is normal, it is unlikely to be a long-standing growth failure. It means that this is a recent onset IUGR and it's usually nutritional. Then you said that you look at all the other factors, nutrition, infections, that's there. But mainly now you're looking at the crown rump length. So that becomes important because this will give you an idea of a upper segment in that sense compared to body length. So these three, so ponderal index and this sort of a CRL total body length ratio is the most important. Of course, if there are any dysmorphic features, if there is clinodectaly, if there is lymphedema, you will get the diagnosis. But I think this is a very important part to look at.
And the third important group are the ones where the birth length and the birth weights are being severely affected with sparing of the head circumference. These are the ones which we need to identify because they are the ones who can be more likely of Silver-Russell syndrome. So in case if the features are present, then we need to do a genetic test to identify whether it is Silver-Russell syndrome or not. And in case if it is none of them are fitting, then it could be a case of idiopathic SGA, probably due to some rare causes such as the placental or some of the causes which are not identified. So thank you. This is the.
So I think this has been very important part that you mentioned, that etiology has very much important role in terms of prognosis. And if you just look at very simple measures, not looking at too complicated things, looking just in terms of the length, the head circumference, the crown rump length and the facies, most of this diagnosis can be made. So a child who is having compromised height as well as weight, the next step, of course, is whether head circumference is involved or not. So when you say head circumference is spared, you're talking about some of those specific syndromes. While if head is also short, you're talking about either severe metabolic problems or you're talking about intrauterine infections. While if your length is normal, head is normal, only the weight is affected, it is acquired or it is more like an environmental factor. So basically you're looking at the length and the head circumference, which will give you the diagnosis in that perspective.